On December 5, 1945, 5 military aircraft took off from Fort Lauderdale, Florida, carrying 14 experienced crew members. Less than 2 hours into what should have been a routine training exercise, the lead pilot radioed back with a message that would haunt investigators for decades. His compasses had failed. He didn't know where they were, and everything looked wrong. Then, at 7:04 p.m., all contact ceased. The planes vanished. But here's what makes this truly chilling. A massive rescue plane was sent to find them, carrying 13 more men. 23 minutes after takeoff, that plane disappeared too. 6 aircraft, 27 people, gone in a single afternoon. And despite one of the most extensive searches in naval history, covering over 250,000 square miles of ocean, not a single piece of wreckage was ever found. That's the thing about disappearances that keeps us awake at night. They're not just about what's missing, they're about the silence that follows, the questions that multiply with every passing year, and the unsettling realization that sometimes, despite all our technology and determination, people and things simply vanish without explanation. Flight 19, as that squadron became known, represents just one thread in a tapestry of vanishings that defy logic. The flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, was no rookie. He had logged 2,500 flying hours and survived combat tours in the Pacific during World War II. These were Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, proven aircraft that had served reliably throughout the war. The weather forecast called for scattered showers, nothing unusual. Everything about this mission should have been routine. But routine disappeared the moment Taylor's voice crackled over the radio around 3:45 p.m. The conversation that followed reveals something deeply unsettling. Not panic, but confusion. Taylor believed he was flying over the Florida Keys when he was actually over the Bahamas. When other pilots suggested they were lost, Taylor made a decision that would seal their fate. He led them northeast, away from land, deeper into the open Atlantic. Other crew members knew something was wrong. Radio transmissions captured subordinate officers stating that flying west would bring them to the mainland. But Taylor, convinced his compasses were malfunctioning and believing his position was farther south than reality, continued northeast. The Navy's initial investigation blamed Taylor for the loss. Later, they changed it to cause unknown, a phrase that somehow feels more honest and more terrifying, because unknown means we still don't understand what really happened in those final hours. The search and rescue aircraft that went looking for Flight 19 added another layer of mystery. The PBM Mariner took off from Naval Air Station Banana River at 7:27 p.m. with 13 rescue personnel aboard. 23 minutes later, it vanished from radar. A civilian merchant vessel reported seeing an explosion near the water around that time, but no debris was ever recovered. The PBM Mariners were known to have fuel leak issues that made them prone to explosions, but without wreckage, without bodies, without any physical evidence, that explosion remains speculation. This pattern, experienced people, proven equipment, sudden inexplicable vanishings, repeats throughout history with disturbing frequency. Fast forward to March 8, 2014. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a Boeing 777, departed Kuala Lumpur at 12:41 a.m., bound for Beijing. On board were 239 people, including experienced pilots, families, a group of Chinese calligraphy artists returning from an exhibition. 39 minutes after takeoff, the aircraft disappeared from air traffic control radar. Just like that. A massive commercial airliner, one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built, equipped with multiple redundant communication systems, tracking devices, and emergency beacons, simply stopped existing on every screen monitoring it. But what happened in those final minutes before MH370 vanished reveals something more deliberate than mechanical failure. At 1:07 a.m., the aircraft communication addressing and reporting system sent its last transmission before being shut off. Not failing, shut off. Moments later, as the aircraft crossed from Malaysian to Vietnamese airspace, the pilot made a normal-sounding radio call. He never checked in with Vietnamese air traffic controllers as required. The transponder, which broadcast the aircraft's position and identification, was switched off. Again, not failing, switched off. Someone manually disabled the systems designed to track that airplane. Military radar and satellites tracked MH370 as it made a sharp turn, flying back across Malaysia, then northwest over the Andaman Sea, then south into one of the most remote regions of the Indian Ocean. The plane flew for more than 6 hours after disappearing from civilian radar, automated satellite pings confirming its continued flight until 8:11 a.m. Then silence. Think about that timeline. More than 6 hours of flight after disappearing from air traffic control, flying a route that suggests deliberate navigation, yet leaving no distress signals, no communication, no explanation. The search for MH370 became the most expensive aviation search in history. Australia led an underwater search covering 120,000 square kilometers of seafloor in the southern Indian Ocean, an area so remote and deep that search vessels were exposed to brutal conditions thousands of kilometers from the nearest port. They found nothing. A second search by Ocean Infinity covered another 80,000 square kilometers. Still nothing. Then, beginning in July 2015, debris started washing ashore on beaches along the east coast of Africa and islands in the Indian Ocean. A wing flap on Reunion Island, more pieces in Mozambique, Tanzania, South Africa, Madagascar, Mauritius, 27 pieces total, 18 positively or almost certainly identified as coming from MH370. The ocean had returned fragments, but kept the main wreckage and its answers hidden. What makes disappearances like MH370 and Flight 19 so psychologically haunting is that they violate our fundamental understanding of how the modern world works. We live in an era where we can track a package across continents in real time, where satellites photograph every inch of Earth's surface, where even remote wilderness areas leave digital footprints. The idea that something as large as a commercial airliner, filled with people, can simply cease to exist without explanation challenges everything we believe about human capability and control. But these aren't isolated incidents. The pattern persists. In 1763, Owen Parfitt, a paralyzed man in his 60s, sat on his sister's front porch in Somerset, England. Farm workers across the road confirmed they could see him clearly. His sister went inside briefly. When she returned, Parfitt was gone. The chair remained. His blanket was still there. But Parfitt had vanished. This wasn't a man who could walk. He was completely paralyzed. Farm workers swore no one approached the house, no vehicle passed, nothing unusual occurred. A paralyzed man simply disappeared from a porch in full view of witnesses. Author Ambrose Bierce, whose dark stories influenced generations of writers, told friends in 1913 that he was heading to Mexico to join Pancho Villa's revolution. At 71 years old, Bierce sent a few letters from the front lines. Then nothing. He was never seen or heard from again. No body was found, no confirmed death, no closure. Just silence swallowing a man who made his career writing about the mysterious and macabre. In 1946, in West Virginia, the Sauter family home burned on Christmas Eve. 4 children escaped. 5 children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, did not. But here's where it gets strange. Investigators later realized the fire burned too quickly and too cool to have cremated 5 bodies. No remains were ever found in the ashes. The family later received a photograph of a young man who looked remarkably like Louis might have looked as an adult. Strange sightings were reported. The parents spent the rest of their lives believing their children had been kidnapped and were alive somewhere. Were they? We'll never know. The Bennington Triangle in Vermont experienced a cluster of disappearances in the 1940s that investigators still can't explain. Paula Jean Weldon, an 18-year-old college student, went hiking on December 1, 1946. Several people saw her on the trail. Then, she simply ceased to exist. 3 years later, James Tetford vanished from a crowded bus. Passengers saw him dozing in his seat. When the bus arrived at his destination in Bennington, Tetford was gone, but all his belongings remained on the luggage rack. How does someone disappear from a moving bus full of people? These cases share disturbing commonalities. They involve ordinary people doing ordinary things, training exercises, commercial flights, afternoon walks, bus rides, when reality seems to fracture and they slip through a crack in the world. They leave behind fragments, radio transmissions that end mid-sentence, empty chairs that should be occupied, pieces of debris that raise more questions than they answer. The psychological impact on families left behind is profound. Every anniversary becomes a wound reopening. Every similar case in the news triggers the same desperate questions. The families of MH370 victims have lived for over a decade, not knowing if their loved ones died instantly or suffered, whether mechanical failure was to blame or something more sinister, whether the bodies they can't bury rest on the ocean floor or were consumed entirely. Modern technology has solved many historical mysteries. Genealogy testing has identified unknown victims. Satellite imagery has located crash sites in remote regions. Cold cases have been cracked with DNA evidence. But technology also reveals just how vast and deep the world remains. The Indian Ocean covers roughly 27 million square miles. Much of it has never been mapped with high resolution. Underwater trenches plunge to depths that would swallow Mount Everest. In an ocean that deep and that vast, an entire airplane can hide indefinitely.
Thank you for watching this video. If you found these stories interesting, please consider supporting us by liking and subscribing. See you next time for more stories.